I'm the man with the bald head and the long nose. I'm here to introduce to you chapters 9 and 10 of The Bad Beginning. So, I hope you're enjoying the show. I hope you're having a good time with Olaf and me. We're wonderful characters, aren't we? Just the best, especially if you like crime, if you like stealing money and being mean to people. We are definitely the best. Now, we know that Violet, Klaus and Sonny, they're kinda getting put through the ringer, aren't they? Olaf has been sneaky. He's been doing lots of things to try and steal their money. And he's on the way to getting it too. And yes, I'm the one who told Violet that she better watch Olaf, or else he might scar her pretty face. You know, because that's the kind of the man he is. He would do that to a 14-year-old. So, chapters 9 and 10, we find out what happened to Sonny. Did she run away? Did she go for help? Or has something else happened to her? I guess Klaus and Violet will find out soon enough. And we'll see if they have to be in that play, that fabulous play that Count Olaf has set up. Because he's just the best actor in the world. Oh my god, he's so talented and so wonderful. And just so smart. So handsome. And Miss Bell told me to introduce you to some words. I have no idea what any of these words mean. I never finished school. I got through like 4th grade and I ran away because I like to steal so many things. Now, first word that she told me was self-congratulatory. I guess that's just being all impressed with yourself and congratulating yourself. And then despicable. I should be in the dictionary for that one. Should definitely be in there. That just means you have bad behavior, you're known for doing bad and evil things. Parcel. A parcel is a package. Or if you say you're going to parcel someone off, Miss Bell told me it means that you're going to take them and send them away. Hide them. Get rid of them. Next word is shabbily. Excuse me, my nose. It's getting a little messed up. Shabbily. You might say that I dress kind of shabbily in these black robes all the time and I'm dirty. Well, it means you're wearing faded or worn, torn clothing and stuff and it's dirty. Scraggly. That's another word that you could use for some of the people I know. That means rough and not taken care of. Accusations is the next word. I'm surprised I can say that. It means you're blaming someone or saying that they did some wrong stuff. And unsavory. My gosh, that's Sonny. That's Sonny, and that's also Violet and Klaus. Unsavory means somebody that's unpleasant and disagreeable. They never want to do what they're told. They never want to serve us food. It's ridiculous. Sorry, my nose is so long, it keeps like slamming down. And then, another word, whirring. And that means making a humming or buzzing sound. Or like a high sound. 9 is despondent. That just means sad and depressed. And that's how I am when Sonny and Violet and Klaus won't make us dinner. Formulate is another word. Formulate just means you come up with an idea or you make something happen. You make something. Invent something. I don't do that. I don't like doing that. I just like being told what to do and then going and doing it. Right? And then nefarious. That means evil and wicked. Last word. Thank goodness, because I hate vocabulary. That's accomplices. So Sonny and Klaus and Violet are all accomplices. They're partners in crimes. They won't give us the money. So I say that they're partners in crimes. Man, my nose is big, isn't it? Alright, boys and girls, so here we go with the next part of the story. I hope you enjoy it. I hope Count Olaf gets all the money because he's going to give it to me too. Alright, see you later.
The Bad Beginning, Chapter 9. Yes, Count Olaf continued. It certainly is strange to find a child missing, and one so small and helpless. Where's Sunny? Violet cried. What have you done with her? Count Olaf continued to speak as if he had not heard Violet. But then again, one sees strange things every day. In fact, if you two orphans follow me out to the backyard, I think we will all see something rather unusual. The Baudelaire children didn't say anything, but followed Count Olaf through the house and out the back door. Violet looked around the small, scrabbly yard in which she had not been since she and Klaus had been forced to chop wood. The pile of logs they had made was staying there, untouched, as if Count Olaf had merely made them chop logs for his own amusement, rather than for any purpose. Violet shivered, still in her nightgown, but as she gazed here and there, she saw nothing unusual. You're not looking in the right place, Count Olaf said. For children who read so much, you two are remarkably unintelligent. Violet looked over in the direction of Count Olaf, but could not meet his eyes. The eyes on his face, that is. She was staring at his feet, and could see the tattooed eye there that had been watching the Baudelaire orphans since their troubles had begun. Then her eyes travelled up Count Olaf's lean, shabbily dressed body, and she saw that he was pointing up with one scrawny hand. She followed his gesture and found herself looking at the forbidden tower. It was made of dirty stone, with only one lone window, and just barely visible in the window was what looked like a birdcage. "Oh no," Klaus said in a small, scared voice, and Violet looked again. It was a birdcage, dangling from the tower window like a flag in the wind, but inside the birdcage she could see a small and frightened Sunny. When Violet looked closely, she could see there was a large piece of tape across her sister's mouth and ropes around her body. She was utterly trapped. "Let her go," Violet said to Count Olaf. "She hasn't done nothing to you. She is an infant." "Well now," Count Olaf said, sitting on a stump. "If you really want me to let her go, I will. But surely even a stupid brat like you might realize that if I let her go, or more accurately, if I asked my comrade to let her go, poor little Sunny might not survive the fall down to the ground. That's a 30-foot tower, which is a very long way for a very little person to fall, even when she's inside a cage. But if you insist..." "No!" Klaus cried. "Don't!" Violet looked into Count Olaf's eyes, and then at the small parcel that was her sister, hanging from the top of the tower and moving slowly in the breeze. She pictured Sunny toppling from the tower and onto the ground, pictured her sister's last thoughts being ones of sheer terror. "Please," she said to Olaf, feeling tears in her eyes. "She's just a baby. We'll do anything. Just don't harm her." "Anything?" Count Olaf asked, his eyebrow rising. He leaned in toward Violet and gazed into her eyes. "Anything? Would you, for instance, consider marrying me during tomorrow's night's performance?" Violet stared at him. She had an odd feeling in her stomach, as if she were the one being thrown from a great height. The really frightening thing about Olaf, she realized, was that he was very smart to act at all. He wasn't merely an unsavory drunken brute, but an unsavory, clever drunken brute. "While you were busy reading books and making accusations," Count Olaf said, "I had one of my quietest, sneakiest assistants skulk into your bedroom and steal little Sunny away. She is perfectly safe now. But I consider a stick behind a stubborn mule. Our sister's not a stick, Klaus said. A stubborn mule, Count Olaf explained, does not move in the direction its owner wants it to. In that way, it is like you children, who insist on mucking up my plans. Any animal owner will tell you that a stubborn mule will move in the proper direction if there is a carrot in front of it and a stick behind it. It will move toward the carrot because it wants the reward of food and away from the stick because it does not want the punishment of pain. Likewise, you will do what I say to avoid the punishment of the loss of your sister, and because you want the reward of surviving this experience. Now, Violet, let me ask you again, will you marry me? Violet swallowed and looked down at Count Olaf's tattoo. She could not bring herself to answer. Come now, Count Olaf said, his voice faking. A word which here means feigned kindness. He reached out a hand and stroked Violet's hair. Would it be so terrible to be my bride? To live in my house for the rest of your life? You're such a lovely girl. After marriage, I would not dispose of you like your brother and sister. Violet imagined sleeping beside Count Olaf and waking up each morning to look at his terrible man. She pictured wandering around the house, trying to avoid him all day, and cooking for his terrible friends at night. Perhaps every night, for the rest of her life. But then she looked up at her helpless sister and knew what her answer must be. If you let Sunny go, she said finally, I will marry you. I will let Sunny go, Count Olaf answered, after tomorrow night's performance. In the meantime, she will remain in the tower for safekeeping. And as a warning, I will tell you that my assistants will stand guard at the door to the tower staircase, in case you were getting any ideas. You terrible man! Klaus spat out, but Count Olaf merely smiled again. Oh, I may be a terrible man, Count Olaf said, but I have been able to concoct a foolproof way of getting your fortune, which is more than you've been able to do. With that, he began to stride toward the house. Remember that, orphans, he said. You may have read more books than I have, but it didn't help you gain the upper hand. Now, give me that book which gave you such grand ideas, and do the chores assigned to you. Klaus sighed and relinquished, a word which here means gave to Count Olaf, even though he didn't want to, the book on nuptial law. He began to follow Count Olaf into the house, but Violet stayed still as a statue. She hadn't been listening to what that last speech of Count Olaf said, knowing it would be full of the usual self-congratulatory nonsense and despicable insults. She was staring at the tower, not at the top, where his sister was dangling, but the whole length of it. Klaus looked back at her and saw something he hadn't seen in quite some time. To those who hadn't been around Violet long, nothing would have seemed unusual. But those who knew her well knew that when she tied her hair up in that ribbon to keep it out of her eyes, it meant that the gears and levers of her inventing brain were whirring at top speed. Chapter 10. That night, Klaus was a Baudelaire orphan sleeping fitfully in bed, and Violet was a Baudelaire orphan staying up, working by the light of the moon. All day, the two siblings had wandered around the house, doing the assigned chores and scarcely speaking to each other. Klaus was too tired and despondent to speak, and Violet was holed up in the inventing area of her mind, too busy planning to talk. When night approached, Violet gathered up the curtains that had been Sunny's bed and brought them to the door to the tower stairs, where the enormous assistant of Count Olaf's, the one who looked like neither a man nor a woman, was standing guard. Violet asked whether she could bring the blankets to her sister to make her more comfortable during the night. The enormous creature merely looked at Violet with its blank white eyes and shook its head, then dismissed her with a silent gesture. Violet knew, of course, that Sunny was too terrified to be comforted by a handful of draperies, but she hoped that she would be allowed a few moments to hold her and tell her that everything would turn out all right. Also, she wanted to do something known in the crime industry as casing the joint. Casing the joint means observing a particular location in order to formulate a plan. For instance, if you are a bank robber, although I hope you aren't, you might go to the bank a few days before you plan to rob it. Perhaps wearing a disguise, you would look around the bank and observe security guards, cameras, and other obstacles so you could plan how to avoid capture or death during your burglary. Violet, a law-abiding citizen, was not planning to rob a bank, but she was planning to rescue Sonny and was hoping to catch a glimpse of the tower room in which her sister was being held, so as to make her plan more easily done. But it appeared that she wasn't going to be able to case the joint after all. This made Violet nervous as she sat on the floor by the window, working on her invention as quietly as she could. Violet had very few materials with which to invent something, and she didn't want to wander around the house looking for more for fear of arousing the suspicions of Count Olaf and his troop. But she had enough to build a rescuing device. Above the window was a sturdy metal rod from which the curtains had hung, and Violet took it down. Using one of the rocks Olaf had left in a pile in the corner, she broke the curtain rod into 2 pieces. She then bent each piece of the rod into several sharp angles, leaving tiny cuts on her hands as she did so. Then Violet took down the painting of the eye. On the back of the painting, as on the back of many paintings, was a small piece of wire to hang on the hook. She removed the wire and used it to connect 2 pieces together. Violet had now made what looked like a large metal spider. She then went over to the cardboard box and took out the ugliest clothes that Mrs. Poe had purchased, the outfits the Baudelaire orphans would never wear no matter how desperate they were. Working quickly and quietly, she began to tear these into long, narrow strips and to tie these strips together. Among Violet's many useful skills was a vast knowledge of different types of knots. The particular knot she was using was called the Devil's Tongue. A group of female Finnish pirates invented it back in the 15th century and named it the Devil's Tongue because it twisted this way and that in a most complicated and eerie way. The Devil's Tongue was a very useful knot, and when Violet tied the cloth strips together, end to end, it formed a sort of rope. As she worked, she remembered something her parents had said to her when Klaus was born, and again when they brought Sonny home from the hospital. "You are the oldest, Baudelaire," they had said kindly but firmly, "and as the eldest, it will always be your responsibility to look after your younger siblings. Promise us that you will always watch out for them and make sure they don't get into trouble." Violet remembered her promise and thought of Klaus, whose bruised face still looked sore, and Sonny dangling from the top of the tower like a flag, and began working faster. Even though Count Olaf was of course the cause of all this misery, Violet felt as if she had broken her promise to her parents, and vowed to make it right. Eventually, using enough of the ugly clothing, Violet had a rope that was, she hoped, just over 30 feet long. She tied it one end of it to the metal spider and looked at her handiwork. What she had made was called a grappling hook, which is something used for climbing up the sides of buildings, usually for a nefarious purpose. Using the metal end to hook onto something at the top of the tower, and the rope to aid her climb, Violet hoped to reach the top of the tower, untie Sunny's cage, and climb back down. This was, of course, a very risky plan, but both because it was dangerous and because she had made the grappling hook herself, instead of purchasing it at a store that sold such things. But a grappling hook was all Violet could think of to make without proper inventing laboratory, and time was running short. She hadn't told Klaus about her plan because she didn't want to give him false hope, so without waking him, she gathered up her grappling hook and tiptoed out of the room. Once outside, Violet realized her plan was even more difficult than she had thought. The night was quiet, which would mean she would have to make practically no noise at all. The night was also slightly breezy, and when she pictured herself swinging in the breeze, clinging to a rope made of ugly cloth, she almost gave up entirely. And the night was dark, so it was hard to see where she could toss the grappling hook and have the metal arms hook onto something. But standing there, shivering in her nightgown, Violet knew she had to try. Using her right hand, she threw the grappling hook as high and as hard as she could, and waited to see if it would catch onto something. Clang! The hook made a sound as it hit the tower, but it didn't stick to anything and came crashing back down. Her heart pounding, Violet stood stock still, wondering if Count Olaf or one of his accomplices would come and investigate. But nobody arrived after a few moments, and Violet, swinging the hook over her head like a lasso, tried again. Clang! Clang! The grappling hook hit the tower twice as it bounced back down to the ground. Violet waited for footsteps, but all she heard was her own terrified pulse. She decided to try one more time. Clang! The grappling hook hit the tower and fell down again, hitting Violet hard in the shoulder. One of the arms tore her nightgown and cut through her skin. Biting down on her hand to keep from crying out in pain, Violet felt the place in her shoulder where she had been struck, and it was wet with blood. Her arm throbbed in pain. At this point in the proceedings, if I were Violet, I would have given up. But just as she was about to turn around and go inside the house, she pictured how scared Sunny must be, and ignoring the pain in her shoulder, Violet used her right hand to throw the hook again. Clang! The usual clang sound stopped halfway through, and Violet saw in the dim light of the moon that the hook wasn't falling. Nervously, she gave the rope a good yank, and it stayed put. The grappling hook had worked! Her feet touching the side of the stone tower, and her hands grasping the rope, Violet closed her eyes and began to climb. Never daring to look around, she pulled herself up the tower, hand over hand, all the time keeping in mind her promise to her parents and the horrible things Count Olaf would do if his villainous plan worked. The evening wind blew harder and harder as she climbed higher and higher, and several times Violet had to stop climbing as the rope moved in the wind. She was certain that at any moment the cloth would tear or the hook would slip, and Violet would be sent tumbling to her death. But thanks to her adroit inventing skills. The word adroit here means skillful. Everything worked the way it was supposed to work, and suddenly Violet found herself feeling a piece of metal instead of a cloth rope. She opened her eyes and saw her sister Sunny, who was looking at her frantically and trying to say something past the strip of tape. Violet had arrived at the top of the tower right at the window where Sunny was tied. The eldest Baudelaire Orphan was about to grab her sister's cage and begin her descent when she saw something that made her stop. It was a spidery end of the grappling hook, which was, after several attempts, finally stuck onto something on the tower. Violet had guessed during her climb that it had found some notch in the stone, or part of the window, or perhaps a piece of furniture inside the tower room, and stuck there. But that wasn't what the hook had stuck on. Violet's grappling hook had stuck on another hook. It was one of the hooks on the hook-handed man, and his hook, Violet saw, was glinting in the moonlight as it reached right toward her.
Oh, now we're done with 9 and 10. I'm so glad that Justin Strauss is reading it. I can't read. I can't get away with doing nothing. I don't even know how to write my name. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Anyway, now we know what Count Olaf's plan is. So, he got Sonny all up in a cage. Oh my gosh, he's such a genius. And then Violet thought she was being all smart by getting up there and trying to save her little sister. We knew that wasn't going to happen. Knew it. I'm so glad my friend the hook-handed man, my accomplice, that he got Violet. And now we'll find out next time what happens to Violet now that she's gotten captured. And then what's Klaus going to do? Klaus is the only one who's free. Is he going to be able to come up with anything to do? Probably not. He's not smart enough. And we'll see what happens with the play. I guess Violet, she'll just have to marry Count Olaf after all, huh? So, he can get all the money and I can get too. That's just what I want. Get my hands on some money. So just tune in next week and you will see what happens to these bratty kids. And if Olaf the Great can take over all the money. That's what I want. Alright, kids. Go get yourself into some trouble. And have a good night, good day. Stay up all night. Be bad. Do everything that you're not supposed to do. Don't listen to your parents. Listen to me and Count Olaf. Alright. See ya later.